66 million years ago, on a spring morning that should have been the end of an era, the history of our planet hung on a cosmic coin toss. A rock the size of a mountain, a carbonaceous chondrite 10 kilometers wide, was hurtling through the vacuum of space at 20 kilometers per second. Its trajectory had been shaped by the subtle gravitational nudges of Jupiter, the passing whispers of long-dead comets, and the chaotic dance of the solar system over billions of years. In the history we know that rocks slammed into the shallow waters of the Yucatan Peninsula with the force of 100 million nuclear weapons, vaporizing the crust, igniting the atmosphere, and plunging the Earth into a twilight of ash and ice that killed three-quarters of all life. That is the history written in stone, when in the layer of iridium-rich clay that separates the age of reptiles from the age of mammals. But tonight, we traverse the razor's edge of probability. We are going to watch that rock miss. Perhaps it arrived 20 minutes late, the Earth having rotated just enough to let the impactor splash harmlessly into the deep waters of the Pacific. Perhaps it arrived an hour early, skimming the upper atmosphere like a stone skipping across a pond, screaming back into the dark void, never to return. In this timeline, the flash of light in the sky was not a harbinger of doom, but a momentary spectacle. The tsunamis were regional, not global. The dust settled in weeks, not years. The sun did not vanish. And when the dawn broke on the first day of the Cenozoic era, the dinosaurs were still there. To understand the world that followed, we must first dismantle a persistent myth. We often think of the dinosaurs of the late Cretaceous as a dynasty in decline, lumbering, cold-blooded relics stumbling toward an inevitable curtain call. This is a lie. The world of 66 million years ago was not a senescent kingdom. It was a biological empire at its zenith. The climate was warm and wet, a greenhouse world where forests stretched from pole to pole. There were no ice caps. The sea levels were 170 meters higher than today, turning North America into an archipelago divided by the Western Interior Seaway. And in this lush, hyper-oxygenated world, the dinosaurs were not merely surviving, they were innovating. Consider the Tyrannosaurus rex. Strip away the movie monster and look at the animal as it truly was. 12 meters of muscle and bone, when weighing 9 tons, possessing a binocular vision superior to that of a modern hawk. This was not a mindless scavenger waiting for the world to die. This was a hyper-efficient apex predator with a brain larger than any reptile that had come before it, capable of tracking prey from 6 kilometers away. Below the tyrant king, the ecosystem was teeming with specialization. The Triceratops were not just rhinoceros-like curiosities. They were the bison of the Cretaceous, moving in herds that shook the earth, their dental batteries grinding through vegetation with industrial efficiency. The hadrosaurs, the duck-billed giants, had evolved the most complex chewing systems in the history of life, processing plant matter in ways no mammal has ever matched. This dominance was not accidental. It was built on physiological superiority, which we often tell ourselves that mammals were the inevitable inheritors of the earth, waiting in the wings with their superior warm-blooded metabolisms. But the truth is far more humbling. Dinosaurs possessed a respiratory system of unidirectional airflow, similar to modern birds, which extracted oxygen far more efficiently than the mammalian lung. They had hollow pneumatic bones that allowed them to grow to sizes physically impossible for a mammal. They laid eggs, freeing them from the long, vulnerable gestation periods that constrained placental reproduction. In the late Cretaceous, mammals were not waiting for their turn. They were trapped. They were ecologically suppressed, forced into the nocturnal shadows, the burrows in the insectivore niches by a ruling class of reptiles that simply did everything better. So, when the asteroid missed, the mammals did not rise. They stayed exactly where they were, shrews and multituberculates scurrying through the underbrush, terrified of the thundering giants above. 10 million years post-divergence, the world still looked remarkably Cretaceous. But evolution never stops. The planet was changing, not from a singular cataclysm, but from the slow, inexorable drift of continents and the rise of new plant life. The flowering plants, the angiosperms, were exploding in diversity, and with them came fruit, nature's great bribe. In our timeline, the early primates seized the arboreal fruit-eating niche. In this world, the dinosaurs claimed it. Picture the descendants of the small feathered maniraptorans, agile, intelligent, and equipped with grasping hands. Over 10 million years, they evolved into the ecological equivalents of monkeys and lemurs. These were not birds, but something in between. Feathered climbers with toothless beaks hooked for tearing fruit skins, leaping from branch to branch in the canopy of a world that was still warm, still green, and still undeniably theirs. But the true test of this alternate timeline arrived 55 million years ago. The Earth experienced a sudden violent fever known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Global temperatures spiked by nearly 8 degrees Celsius. The poles became tropical. In our history, this heat wave tortured the early mammals, forcing many to shrink in size to dissipate heat. But for the dinosaurs, this hothouse Earth was not a crisis, it was a paradise. Large dinosaurs were likely gigantotherms, their sheer mass maintaining a stable internal temperature. They didn't need to burn calories to stay warm, nor did they struggle as desperately to cool down as a frantic, high-metabolism mammal. The heat opened up the high latitudes. The forests of Antarctica and the Arctic Circle became lush, year-round habitats. We would see herds of hadrosaurs grazing under the midnight sun of a polar summer, their migrations tracking the endless daylight. We would see the great sauropods, the long-necked titans that had begun to fade in the Cretaceous, finding a second wind in these new, high-canopy polar rainforests. And in the oceans, a different kind of dominance was solidifying. In our world, the extinction of the marine reptiles left a vacuum eventually filled by whales. In this world, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs never left. The Eocene oceans were a terrifying, majestic arena. The mosasaurs, effectively giant marine lizards with the bite force of a T-Rex, evolved into sleek, open-ocean cruisers, some reaching lengths that rivaled the later sperm whales. The plesiosaurs, with their absurdly long necks, adapted to become ambush predators in the kelp forests or filter feeders straining the plankton-rich waters. The seas remained the domain of reptiles, breathing air but born of the water, denying mammals any foothold in the marine ecosystem. By the time the Eocene epoch reached its peak, 50 million years ago, the dinosaur dynasty had lasted for nearly 200 million years. They had weathered continental drift, volcanic winters, and now extreme global warming. And they had proven that their dominance was not a fluke of the Mesozoic, but a robust biological reality capable of adapting to almost any condition. They were the masters of the land, the air, and the sea. But the Earth is restless. The tropical idyll of the Eocene could not last forever. Far to the south, Antarctica was breaking away from South America, opening a gateway for cold ocean currents to circle the pole. India was slamming into Asia, thrusting the Himalayas into the stratosphere and drawing down carbon dioxide. The planetary thermostat was about to break. The cooling was coming. The lush, closed canopy forests that had sheltered the dinosaurs for eons were about to fracture, giving way to a new alien landscape of open plains and scrublands. The age of the greenhouse was ending. The age of grass was beginning. And for the masters of the Mesozoic, the rules of survival were about to change fundamentally. The question was no longer whether they could survive the heat, but whether they could endure the cold, the exposure, and the rise of a humble plant that would grind their teeth to dust. The Golden Age was over. The hard work of the Cenozoic was about to begin. Around 34 million years ago, the Earth began a transformation that was less an event and more a slow-motion siege. The trigger was the isolation of Antarctica. As the southern continent drifted away from South America, the Antarctic circumpolar current began to flow, locking the land in a freezer and disrupting the global transfer of heat. The planetary thermostat, set to tropical for over 150 million years, was suddenly turned down, when the endless rainforests that had carpeted the continents began to fracture. In their place appeared a humble, low-growing invader that would rewrite the rules of life on Earth. Grass. Grass is deceptive. To us, it is a lawn, a pasture, a backdrop. But in the evolutionary history of plants, it is a conqueror. Unlike trees which grow from their tips and die when grazed, grass grows from the base. It welcomes fire. It withstands trampling. And crucially, it defends itself with silica phytoliths, microscopic shards of glass embedded in its tissue. To eat grass is to chew on sandpaper. In our timeline, this abrasive diet drove the evolution of horses and cattle, forcing them to develop high-crowned, continuously growing teeth. In this alternative history, the challenge of the grasslands fell to the dinosaurs. The transition from the Eocene forest to the Miocene plains was a brutal filter. Many lineages, specialized for browsing soft leaves in the canopy, simply vanished. But others adapted with terrifying speed. The ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs, underwent a radical redesign. The ornate frills of their ancestors, once used for display and thermoregulation, became compact and reinforced, anchoring massive jaw muscles capable of the repetitive, grinding motion needed to process silica-rich grass. They became the bison of this new world, low-slung, heavy-set, moving in herds numbering in the thousands. The ground would have trembled not just from their weight, but from the sheer scale of their migration. Alongside them, the hadrosaurs flourished. Their dental batteries, stacks of hundreds of interlocking teeth, were pre-adapted for this abrasive new diet. They didn't need to evolve new tools, they simply applied their existing machinery to a harder problem. But the open plains brought a new danger. In a forest, you survive by hiding. On the steppe, there is nowhere to hide. You survive by running or by fighting. This environmental shift forced a revolution among the predators. For millions of years, the tyrannosaur body plan, massive, heavy, built for ambush and overwhelming force, had been the gold standard. But a 6-ton ambush predator is useless on an open plain where prey can see you from 3 kilometers away. The T-Rex of the Cretaceous was a heavyweight boxer. The Miocene required a marathon runner, and so the tyrants changed. Over millions of years, natural selection whittled them down. And the tyrannosaurs of the grasslands became leaner, their legs lengthening in proportion to their bodies. They shed the bulk that made them kings of the forest and traded it for stamina. But even a fast tyrannosaur cannot catch a galloping hadrosaur alone. The physics of the open plain dictated a change not just in body, but in mind. The age of the solitary monster ended. The age of the pack began. We see hints of social behavior in the fossil record of our own timeline. But in this world, it became the law of the land. Picture a pack of these cursorial tyrannosaurs, perhaps 6 meters long, feathered in patterns of tawny grass gold and shadow gray. They do not roar. They communicate with low-frequency infrasound, felt rather than heard. They hunt with the coordination of wolves, when using flanking maneuvers to drive a panic-stricken herd into a kill zone. This is not a mindless feeding frenzy. It is a tactical operation. The selective pressure of the grasslands forced these reptiles to develop a level of cooperation that rivaled the mammals of our timeline. But if we are talking about dinosaur intelligence, we must address the most controversial question of all. Could they have become smart? In 1982, paleontologist Dale Russell proposed the dinosauroid, a thought experiment suggesting that if Trudon, a small, large-brained dinosaur, had continued to evolve, it would have inevitably become a humanoid creature, upright, tailless, with a large head and human-like hands. It is a compelling image, but it betrays a profound human bias. It assumes that intelligence requires a human shape. When evolution does not aim for humanity, intelligence is a tool, like a wing or a claw, and it can exist in bodies that look nothing like ours. Look at the raven, a modern dinosaur with the problem-solving capacity of a primate, yet it has no hands. Look at the octopus, an alien intelligence in a boneless body. In our alternative timeline, the troodontids did not turn into green-skinned humans. They remained dinosaurs, but they became something extraordinary. Imagine a creature the size of a wolf, covered in iridescent feathers, with large forward-facing eyes and grasping hands that retain their 3 sharp claws. Its brain-to-body ratio rivaled that of an early hominid. This animal, let's call it Venator sapiens, the wise hunter, did not build cities or write sonnets. It did not gaze at the stars and wonder why it existed. But it understood the world in a way its ancestors never did. It used tools, rocks to smash open bones, sticks to probe for prey. It understood cause and effect. It had a language of complex vocalizations and body postures, capable of conveying abstract concepts, Danger from above, water to the east, wait for the signal. These intelligent dinosaurs occupied the ecological niche that early humans and wolves filled in our world. They were the adaptable opportunists. They raided the nests of larger dinosaurs. They coordinated hunts for small game. And perhaps they even engaged in a primitive form of culture, passing down learned behaviors from one generation to the next. A young Venator did not just inherit instincts, it was taught how to survive. This was the pinnacle of dinosaur evolution, a mind capable of learning, operating within a body built for killing. And yet, despite this explosion of reptilian diversity, the mammals remained. They were not extinct, but they were invisible. The age of mammals that defines our Cenozoic era never happened. In this timeline, mammals were the resistance movement of the biosphere. They held the night. While the great herds of dinosaurs slept, the forest came alive with furry, warm-blooded creatures. They diversified into forms we would recognize: gliders, burrowers, swimmers, but they hit a glass ceiling. They could not grow large. To be a large mammal was to be a slow, tasty snack for a dinosaur. So the mammals conquered the realms the dinosaurs ignored. They became masters of the underground, building complex subterranean cities where no theropod could follow. They conquered the high canopy, when evolving into primate-like forms that never dared to touch the ground. And in the deep ocean, below the sunlit hunting grounds of the mosasaurs, mammals may have found their only true kingdom. It is possible that in the crushing darkness of the abyss, whale-like mammals evolved to hunt squid using sonar, exploiting a niche where the reptilian reliance on sight and surface air was a liability. By the late Miocene, 20 million years ago, the world had settled into a new equilibrium. The vast golden grasslands stretched across Eurasia and North America, teeming with herds of horned and duck-billed giants. The predators that stalked them were smart, fast, and social. The forests were shrinking, pushing life to the margins, forcing innovation through adversity. But the cooling that had begun with the isolation of Antarctica was not finished. The Earth was wobbling on its axis, its orbit interacting with the other planets in a cycle that would drive the temperature down further still. The ice was coming. Not just the seasonal snows of the polar winter, but the grinding, mile-thick glaciers of the Ice Age. The dinosaurs had conquered the heat of the Eocene. They had mastered the dry plains of the Miocene. Now they faced the ultimate test. Could a lineage born in the tropical warmth of the Triassic survive a world of ice? The answer would require the most dramatic physical transformation in their 230 million year history. The kings of the earth were about to put on their winter coats. 2.5 million years ago, the Pleistocene epoch descended like a white shroud, and the global cooling that had been a whisper in the Miocene became a scream. Ice sheets, kilometers thick, marched south from the Arctic, bearing Scandinavia, Canada, and the northern United States. In our timeline, this was the age of the woolly mammoth, the cave bear, and the saber-toothed cat. Mammals that had evolved thick fur and massive bodies to endure the bitter cold. But in this alternative history, the tundra did not belong to the mammals. It belonged to the dinosaurs. The idea of a snow dinosaur seems contradictory, a violation of the tropical image we have cultivated for centuries. But nature does not care about our expectations. It cares about physics. And the physics of survival in the cold favors the large. This is Bergman's rule. As the climate cools, animals get bigger to conserve heat. The dinosaurs, already the champions of gigantism, were pre-adapted for this frozen world. Picture the mammoth steppe, that vast band of dry, cold grassland stretching from France to Alaska. In our world, it was patrolled by herds of shaggy elephants. In this world, the dominant herbivore is the woolly ceratopsian. Imagine an animal the size of industrial machinery, built like a tank, but covered in a dense, shaggy coat of proto-feathers that looks remarkably like fur. These filaments, evolved from the simple quills of their ancestors, trap a layer of warm air against the skin, insulating the animal against temperatures that drop to 40 degrees below zero. Its frill, once a display structure, is now a thick, vascularized heat exchanger, flushed with blood to warm the body in the morning sun, or restricted to conserve core temperature during the long winter nights. These herds migrate on a scale that defies imagination. Millions of animals move with the seasons, following the retreat of the ice in spring to graze on the explosive growth of the Arctic summer, then retreating south as the polar night descends. They are biological bulldozers, clearing snow with massive shovel-like beaks to reach the frozen grass beneath. Stalking them through the blizzards is the apex predator of the Ice Age, the polar tyrannosaur. This is not the sleek runner of the Miocene plains, nor the heavy ambush predator of the Cretaceous jungle. This is a monster built for endurance. It is white as a ghost, covered in thick plumage that renders it invisible against the snow. It hunts in silence, its breath steaming in the frigid air, a pack of 6-ton wolves coordinating a slow, relentless pursuit that exhausts their prey before the first bite is ever delivered. But the most profound difference in this world is not what is present, but what is absent. In our timeline, the Pleistocene was the crucible of humanity. It was the shifting climate, the drying forests, and the expanding savannas of Africa that forced a peculiar lineage of apes out of the trees and onto two legs. It was the struggle to survive in a chaotic world that drove the expansion of our brains, the mastery of fire, and the birth of language. In this alternative timeline, that sequence of events never happens. The primates, if they exist at all, are still in the trees, small and terrified, keeping their heads down in a world ruled by dragons. There is no descent from the canopy. There is no mastery of fire. There is no stone tool revolution. The niche of the intelligent, cooperative hunter is already filled by the troodontids, and they have no need to invent agriculture or build cathedrals. They are perfectly adapted to their world as it is. So let us look at the Earth of today, the Holocene, the present moment. The ice has retreated, leaving behind a world of temperate forests and vast grasslands. The geography is identical to ours. The continents are in the same places. The Hudson River still flows into the Atlantic. The Himalayas still pierce the sky. But the silence is deafening. There are no cities, no highways carving through the mountains, no contrails scratching the stratosphere. Where the night side of the Earth is pitch black, save for the natural bioluminescence of the oceans and the flickering light of wildfires. The atmosphere is pristine, carbon dioxide levels holding steady at pre-industrial baselines. The sixth mass extinction, the one we are currently causing, never began. Stand on the shores of the Mediterranean. In our world, this sea is a graveyard of overfishing and pollution. In this world, it is a thriving ecosystem. Plesiosaurs bask on the rocky outcrops of the Greek islands. Pterosaurs, the size of albatrosses, nest on the cliffs of Gibraltar, diving into waters teeming with fish. The land is wild, unbroken, and dangerous. A trek across Europe would be a journey through a wilderness that makes the Serengeti look like a gentle garden. In North America, the Great Plains are a sea of grass rippling under the wind, grazed by herds of hadrosaurs that stretch from horizon to horizon. They are followed by the descendants of the dromaeosaurs, the raptors, now evolved into social hunters that fill the niche of the coyote and the wolf. In the Amazon, the rainforest is a multi-layered kingdom where sauropods still strip the high canopy, their long necks reaching where no other animal can go, while the forest floor is a dark, perilous maze patrolled by solitary ambush hunting abelisaurids. It is a world of breathtaking, savage beauty, a world where the balance of nature is maintained not by human management, but by the brutal, honest arithmetic of predator and prey. It is a world that works perfectly well without us. And this leads us to the final, an uncomfortable truth of our thought experiment. We like to think of ourselves as the inevitable climax of evolution, the point of the whole story. We tell ourselves that intelligence, our kind of intelligence, was the destination life was always heading toward. But the dinosaur timeline suggests otherwise. It suggests that we are a fluke, a cosmic accident born of a rock falling from the sky. If the asteroid had missed, consciousness as we know it, the ability to look at the stars and ask why, the ability to tell stories, to mourn the past and fear the future, might never have emerged. The Earth would have continued for hundreds of millions of years, vibrant and alive, but unaware of itself. The dinosaurs would have lived, struggled, and died, but they would never have named the planets or calculated the age of the universe. Does that make their world lesser than ours? Is a universe without an observer truly empty? Or is there a purity in a world that simply is, a world that exists for its own sake, unburdened by the need for meaning? Perhaps in the end, the asteroid was a gift. It cost the Earth its greatest dynasty, but it bought the universe a voice. It cleared the stage for the mammals, for the primates, for the strange, hairless apes who would one day look back at the fossil record and wonder what might have been. But tonight, in the quiet of your own mind, let the modern world fade away. Forget the emails, the traffic, the noise of civilization. Close your eyes and listen. Can you hear it? The deep, rhythmic thrumming of a hadrosaur heard on the move, the shriek of a pterosaur catching the thermal updraft, the rustle of a troodontid stalking through the tall grass. The dinosaurs are gone, but in the infinite branching of the multiverse, in the timeline next door, they are still there. They are walking through the ruins of a future that never happened, under the light of a sun that never dimmed. They are the masters of the earth, and they do not miss us at all. What if the Ice Age happened to dinosaurs?